Good evening. Welcome to Scarritt Bennett's Poets Corner. We are glad you are here. If you are watching us online or if you are here in person, welcome. This is a fun evening. We are grateful to have Chance Chambers back all the way from Birmingham, Alabama, where he flew south a few years ago out of Nashville, where he had lived for over 35 years. Originally from Paris, Tennessee, right?
That's right.
All right. He is going to read for us, and part of his mixed tape collection. Notice the t-shirt, too, if you can see it when he comes up. But he's been published in several publishings. The Perfume River Poetry Review, #1, a literary journal, Sobotka Literary Magazine, and an anthology, Sinew, 10 Years of Poetry in the Brew. Muscadine Lines, a Southern anthology and gathering, writers of Williamson County. I appreciate the fact that his wife, Jennifer, and her parents are here to watch him, as well as some of his friends. So it is a pleasure. I want to have Chance come on up, and again, I appreciate you all being here.
Thank you, Donna. It's good to be back. Appreciate you guys braving all the subvariants and general world chaos to be here. When I was getting ready for this reading, looking at old notes, I realized that this is my 6th anniversary of first appearing at Poets Corner to the day. Yeah, it was July 28th in, thanks, 2016. So it's good to be back. Appreciate everybody at Scarritt Bennett having me back, and it's good to be back in Midtown and on this campus. It always is. As Donna mentioned, I kind of, to quote Ralphie in A Christmas Story, I did a theme. I sort of. I had this idea of calling this reading the last mixtape, sort of with the idea of kind of maybe paying a little tribute to how music shows up in a lot of my writing, to various degrees, sometimes prominently and sometimes just on the periphery, just a mention. And so I got to thinking about mixtapes. Donna mentioned the shirt. I'm short, don't know if you can see it, but it's cassettes. And the idea of the whole concept of a mixtape, sharing and the gift of music. But I kind of thought, the more I thought about that, I thought about how, for me, that idea maybe transcends the plastic box and magnetic tape, even CDs, playlists, how music can be gifted by moments, by other people, by the universe. So these poems are going to kind of weave in and out of that maybe, and there will be a mention of a few songs here and there. I think there may be mentions of some songs more than once in more than one piece, so you're welcome to develop a drinking game or bingo, or anytime you hear a song. I guess maybe here, bingo, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. So let's just do bingo. So, like a mixtape, I've divided, like a cassette, I've divided this reading into 2 parts, side 1 and side 2. At least that's the plan. We'll see how it goes. So, side 1's called Vinyl Meditations and J-Card Calligraphy. J-cards, I don't know if you guys remember, but those were the inserts in cassette boxes where if it's one you recorded yourself, you wrote the stuff. But anyway. So I got to thinking about what might have been my first metaphorical mixtape, if you want to think about it that way. And I landed on the memory of how my grandfather, when I was in grade school, used to play trucker songs at night when we went to bed. He had to listen to music, and I always slept on a cot in the side of the room where they were sleeping. And he had his CB and his record player and his 8-track tape player next to his bed, and he would put in these 8-tracks, and we're talking Red Sovine, C.W. McCall, that kind of thing. And I pretty much, we all slept. These trucker songs were infused in our dreams and sleep. So it's probably no surprise that gets mentioned in at least one poem. And it does in this one. And this is called Nashville Needs More Harpsichords. A little tribute to being back here, too. Baroque country seems like an unlikely genre, but any science spinner or hipster will tell you there's more to this city than cowboy boots, hot pants, and songs about trucks. There's a secret world of phosphorescent possibility with the taste like rogue bourbon, an alleyway realm of rusty truth rising from the cracks in a sidewalk broken under tomorrow's jackhammer. There are steps to an empty lot where ghosts stamp out cigarettes under soles worn against concrete foundations, where weeds sprout like Christmas trees, no lights but a sky of contrails and stars. There's a house with stairs to nothing, where Ignis Fatuus, patron saint of luminous decay and the never was, does a shot of radiator hooch every time someone mentions ghosts. The only ghosts I know lost themselves in the spin of an 8-track tape of trucker songs, Iggy says. 1973 was a hell of a year. I confess the dead visit me in my sleep, between dreams of loose teeth. Why do you grind so, Iggy asks. Why do you look for shadows in the dark? Then he puts a finger against his lips and cuts his eyes toward the gaudy neoscape of Lower Broadway. When we're both quiet for another breath each, the faint jangle of a harpsichord finds us through the carnival of neo-twang and beer chatter. I know the melody, and so does Iggy. He smiles because he's a Johnny Cash fan. I smile because I know every word to I Still Miss Someone. Thanks. So those weekends at Granny and Papa's, that's what I call my grandparents, they also involved the Saturday country music TV shows. You guys know the ones, right? What was Ralph Emery's Pop Goes the Country? But the big one, what was the big one? Hee Haw. Yep, that's right. Yep. It was Roy Clark and Buck Owens sort of leading all that up. And that was my first introduction to Buck Owens with his red, white, and blue guitar and that sort of slippery, slidey vocal, Southern California vocal. But after college, in college and after, I began to develop a different appreciation for Buck Owens. Thanks in large part to Dwight Yoakam. And he kind of brought him back to the forefront. And during 2020, already kind of a fan of Buck Owens, but I discovered Dwight Yoakam's Bakersfield Beat satellite station on the radio. And that became my work at home soundtrack. And I heard plenty of Buck Owens, and among a lot of other great stuff. So that ended up in a poem too. And this was inspired by the early pandemic days as much as Buck Owens. It's called When Buck Owens Became My Spirit Guide. Are the streets of Bakersfield as desolate as Lower Broadway? Truth is, I don't know if downtown is Ipney now. I haven't been since New Year's Eve when I heard bands playing Skinner on 2 bars on the same block. Today I picture a 1989 scene, storefronts boarded and Saturday streets quiet as Sunday morning, Tootsie's still the epicenter of a honky-tonk and diner streetscape before irony was on the menu and redneck chic was in fashion. Before the Italian restaurant on the corner of 3rd and Church became a bodega. Before I lugged a guitar and nervous energy up the stairs to the Silver Dollar Saloon one last time as tourists pushed into the downstairs for hard rock t-shirts and keychains. Before I touched my face 1,000 times while not touching my face and skate the fragments of another afternoon drift. A Bear Jr.'s pixie cover, frozen chicken tikka masala kati pockets, and conversations with a deaf cat. Squirrel fence view from a satellite desk and daydreams of tubes and domes and hologram hugs. I remember how that back road ferry smelled on an August night. Buck Owens' lunch in another country. Every song is a corner turn into a neighborhood I let burn behind me. These are the liquid days of our separation. Now we split the blanket down the middle with 6 feet between. Buy tortillas and queso through a cantina window, and curb sip margaritas like a lost fare has crashed our streets for the long night on its way to yesterday. The billboards have changed, the sidewalks too, but have I? Thanks, guys. It's sort of in Doctor Who jargon, these are sort of fixed points in time, I guess. Certain mixtape moments that kind of stuck with me. And the next one was probably late grade school, early junior high, on Carter Road. I can't remember a street address, but it was Carter Road, Paris, Tennessee. We had a neighbor named Red. I guess he had red hair. I can't remember, but he had a yard sale one day, and I never knew him to have a yard sale. But this was kind of an epic one, at least in my childhood mind. And he had a huge box, cardboard box, of 45 RPM records. I think everybody here, at least in the auditorium, know what those are, but I know that not everybody these days knows what those are. It's vinyl records, the small vinyl ones. Usually one song on one side and another song on the other side. So he sold some of those, but there was still a lot in that box when the yard sale was over. So he just gifted me the box. Now, I had heard a lot of these songs, but there were a lot of songs in there I hadn't heard. And even the ones I heard, this gave me the opportunity to spend, I don't know, probably the next few years just sitting in my room, pulling out another 45, putting it on the record player and listening to it over and over again. And I had favorites. And one of those, one that became, I don't know, just maybe at the top, in the top 5 of my favorite songs ever, is Crimson and Clover by Tommy James and the Shondells. I don't know how many times I played that from that box, a Red's yard sale box of 45 records. Some others were Seasons in the Sun, No Sugar Tonight by the Guess Who. A lot of the younger folks will not have any idea probably. But Crimson and Clover, that was the song. And it actually found its way in a poem inspired in part by the Labyrinth out here. I may be pointing the wrong direction, but and Joyce was so kind to publish this in her blog a few years back. I wrote it back in 2015, 4 days before the 70th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. It's called A Labyrinth in Midtown. And it's divided in 3 parts based on, for those of you familiar with the Labyrinth out here, there's purgation, illumination, and union, the different stages of walking at meditative sort of phases. Ichi, purgation. I've never let go of anything. Napkin Starship blueprints, Peak guitar picks from 1993, my mother's voicemail greeting from this side of the ether. It's all there among my unpacked ruins, static in the flickering breath of surrendered streetlights. Eyes on the grass, shoes between the bricks. Follow the concentric circles and forget the mosquitoes. Forget tires on asphalt and summer-stained alleyways where my mind leans and waits for October. Lose myself to gray chapel stone, cicada buzz, and broken sky. Forget what I said yesterday. Forget the book I'm not writing. Forget the friend I haven't called and the song perfect for this scene. 1, 5, 4, 5, like crimson and clover. Ni, illumination. 2/3 of this walk puts the sun on my face and arms. The rest is shade, where I hide from the city and its God, from its stale drunk breath that burned my lungs, left me dizzy in a 47-year carousel. San, union. My return finds a rhythm. Breathe in, step, step. Breathe out, step, step. Cradled by trees, I'm cooled by a leaf canopy, and this is my God. But my skin has never known the heat of a Hibakusha morning, and my vision is clear. No shadow flash tattooed on the back of my eyelids. God doesn't meet me on a grassy round path. God blinks, and a 70-year-old wind shakes August leaves. God blinks, and every step stops at 8:16. God blinks, and I count steps and bricks. Thank you. I haven't walked that labyrinth in a while. Is it still, I know they were doing some stones, like sort of dedications to different folks.
Before you go back.
We should do that. Yeah, we absolutely should. All right, next up is high school and my return to church. I was kind of in and out of church during my youth. But I ended up at Maplewood Baptist Church in high school. And I met a gentleman there, Brother Dan, who he worked at the local Suzuki shop. He actually got me a job there, but I didn't know a spark plug from a flux capacitor. So that was a short-lived job. But he's a cool guy. Brother Dan was a cool guy. He was really into music. I don't believe he played an instrument, but he just collected vinyl, and he had a reel-to-reel tape machine. And that's how he put together the mixtape he gave me. He first took the songs, he transferred them from the vinyl to the reel-to-reel tape, and then dubbed them down to the cassette, which I'm not sure why it happened that way. But I thought it was really cool, because I think that's probably the first time I'd ever seen a reel-to-reel tape machine. Not exactly true. The first time, well, that kind, but the first reel-to-reel tape machine was actually one my father had sent to my mother from Vietnam. It was a little one, like this. You could record audio letters on little reel-to-reel tapes and mail. I'm not sure if he actually mailed the tape machine too. Maybe she bought that, but he mailed the tape. And when I was younger, she played me that tape, and it was of him in some club in Tokyo on R&R. It was just pretty much just a jumbled noise. You could hear some people talking, but there was a band playing. I feel like it might have been Born to Be Wild, but I don't know. I don't know that I could really tell, but it was just that little microphone on that reel-to-reel tape player just couldn't handle what was happening on R&R in Tokyo. So this next poem kind of mentions that. It's called a prayer bell coda, and it was actually written as part of a program that the Porch and Oz Arts does called Art Wire now. It was a year at Oz when I did it, and this was written in response to a show called A Thousand Thoughts, a live documentary with the Kronos Quartet. There's a little epigraph here from David Harrington of the Kronos Quartet. What is music? You finish making a note, and that's it. Where is it? 1. Waiting for the music of the somewhere after, we all turn to magnetic dust, pieces of what we once were, clinging to this world like a drunk holds on to a bad idea. The way a lost midtown soul stands outside boomtown bars, decrypts messages coded in the chord changes of cover songs. How a son puts his ear to cold granite and listens for the wind to cut across a field of real estate 6 feet down. The way a widow leans in to hear the whisper spin of 2 reels, 1 speaker, the static score from a Tokyo club, 1967, tube-strangled guitars, thumbtack snare, floor-shaking bass, all too much for a plastic box and its toy microphone. A soldier's capstan-driven voice bleeds into the distorted din of a bar serving R&R 6 hours from a listening post outside Saigon, where he'll bleed again soon enough. Minor 5. Listening for echoes of ghosts, I stumble through God's afterthought and lose myself in the bellows breath of a mellotron. Harpsichord turnarounds distract me with the jangly promise of another tomorrow. I hear messages in the chord changes of fallen FM radio angels. A melody I can't name travels with me thousands of miles in 7 years from Quang Ngai to Sylvan Park, where my brain hums like a crystal glass under a violin bow, the rim vibrating the same frequency my father's hand trembled as he composed a sweat-soaked dispatch to my mother. How's Lobo? He's a pretty good dog. Pat, please drive safely. I'll hold a Browning Par Avion envelope to my ear. No tone, no inflection, no breath. Major 4. I wait for an epitaph etched in oxide, sealed against a substrate of hope, the coda of my expectation song. I wait for the return, one reel unwound and lost from a firebox of relics with no voice, untethered and spinning between memory and time, who offered instead a pagoda, a prayer bell, and an address book to guide my father's soul back home. Thank you. It occurs to me that bingo should probably be for harpsichords too. Seems like I mentioned those a lot. All right, so college, Brian Digby. Good friend, loved music, worked in a cool record store. He's a mixtape master. He gave me my first quintessential mixtape. He did the whole deal. He did block letters. He named it. It's called Smashed Blocked, and block letters on the side. It was a mix of alternative songs, psychedelia from the 60s. There was Mark Bolan's band before T-Rex, John's Children. There was the Beat Farmers from the 80s and 90s. There was a Cheap Trick song I'd never heard. And this sort of, for me, this kind of marked a new era of music making its way into my life, the college years. So we had the country, we had the oldies in Paris, Tennessee, but when I went to college, a whole new world of music opened up, especially with friends like Brian. And he actually still makes mixtapes, CDs these days, and sends them to me. And I saw a lot of great shows with Brian, both bigger bands, local bands, small bands touring to Nashville. One of those bands that I saw, not with Brian, but in a club that we went a lot, was Morphine, a band called Morphine in the 90s. I actually saw them in Austin and in Nashville. And those of you who aren't familiar with the Morphine, the lineup was a drummer, a sax player who sometimes played two saxes at once, and the lead singer, Mark Sandman, and bassist who played a bass with only two strings. So this was one of my bands through the 90s, and I didn't hear from him for a while. And sometime in the early 2000s, I just happened to read online that Mark Sandman had died on stage in Italy. And so in a way, that felt kind of like the end of that era. Not the end of music for me by any means, but that little chapter, the sort of alternative, new realm of music kind of days. And that inspired this poem called Mark Sandman Collapses on Stage, or The Transfiguration of the New Cupid. Valentine's shots all around, the drinks are pretty, and so was the blue glow of emergency phone boxes lined up like a carnival midway, waiting for me to lose everything for one double sax bass slide moment. I could have danced in that parking lot, like I should have danced at the Terrace Theater back in '94 as Sandman leaned into his bullet mic, transmitting electric whiskey sapphire truth into the streets of Austin. The room was hot for March, but nothing like Palestrina in '99. I might have danced there too until his two-string premier bass hit the stage, shaking loose the scene with a rumble as I looked up to see his feedback departure. But I would never dance in this room, where the piano chords have an urgency like crying, "Where are you going? Where are you going?" The upright bass walks the backwards walk of running towards someone leaving, someone gone long enough to be a sepia thought. The Korean sushi chef smiles as I give a thumbs up. The sashimi is good, but the bass could lose a string or two. Miss Mark Sandman. Well, so we were in Midtown with the poem about the labyrinth, but I'm going to bring it back around to Midtown again for the Midtown mixtape years. A lot of music in Midtown all the time. But when I was after college, spent a lot of time at a place over here behind San Antonio Taco Company. I never know if I'm pointing the right way. It's now Helen's Hot Chicken. It was called Guido's back then. And I met so many friends. I played music there, and so many friends played music there. My wife Jennifer came out and played music with us there. She sang with us. And also, just down the street was The Great Escape, just packed full of vinyl and CDs, just all the music you could want, among other things. But back at Guido's, that was probably the first place I heard someone cover the Rolling Stones song, Dead Flowers, which is one of my favorite songs ever. And just, I guess for me, maybe this metaphorical mixtape idea that I'm basically making into whatever I want it to be as we go here. It includes days of making music with friends and friends' music. And a few years ago, I sort of reflected after a grocery shopping trip. I reflected on those days of another lifetime in this poem called Wedding Femmes. The first time I heard Blister in the Sun at a wedding reception, I knew my youth had dropped his last wine cooler bottle to the curb and thumbed a ride west in an Econoline van with tube amp heat and a bed of rusty guitar strings. When I heard Lips Like Sugar in Harris Teeter, I called my youth from a broken payphone at a Mad Max gutted gas station while turkey burgers thawed in my Corolla trunk. I took your favorite jacket, your father's army one you saved for gigs. That's all he said before hanging up. After the pilot light on my Fender amp died, I mailed him an invitation to the funeral. He never showed, but sent a patchouli wreath, dead flowers, and sympathy for only the devil. At the news of my youth's suicide, deep in the week of months I held my liver hostage, I toasted his sweat-screamed songs and remembered when sleep was the only time he ground his teeth. It doesn't get much happier from here, I'm just going to tell you. But I'm sure happy to be here with you guys. Also in Midtown, you guys, I know you remember JJ's Market. It hasn't been gone that long. A convenience store, coffee house. They had all kinds of craft beer, all kinds of sort of imported candy and snacks and magazines. Great place. I would often spend time there, sometimes out front, sitting at the tables, just taking in the Midtown scene. There were times I could hear 3 different playing in 3 different bars at the same time, surrounding the surrounding blocks. There's also this gentleman who would hang out there a lot, and I got to know his name. It was Alan, and one time we interacted a little more. He talked to me a little more. He was not doing very well that night, and that inspired this poem. It's called Damn It, Alan. I smell the breath of Damn It, Alan, whiskey thick and alkaline, in an August wind fractured on the wings of retreating dragonflies. A mantra drifted from Midtown over smokers' medians where we cup our hands around addictions unmentioned, where I hear his whispered plea to call 911. I see the bottle of Jack almost tucked away in a backpack leaned against the wrought iron chair, where Alan slumps and waves off JJ's manager after lifting his chin to mumble, just for me, I'm having a heart attack. I see craft cocktail pilgrims pass us on their way to Johnny Cash cover scenes in bourbon-glazed resignation, until Alan lowers himself to the sidewalk, rolls onto his side and unfolds, a fallen specter in the fluorescence of the market. Why did I wait for a pilgrim in a happy hour dress to balance on her heels and look for Alan's breath before I called 911? When an EMT with a 12-hour face said, "Damn it, Alan," why did I believe the firefighter who turned and told me that's his father? Why do we talk so much about ghosts when everyone leaves this world on a faded bus pass and blocks our calls? The wind only answers with the strained echo of Alan's dry-throated exit refrain, a prayer to the city, to the street, to the first responders who lifted him into the ambulance, to the stretcher he rode, half-mast, propped up on his elbows, to me in my mouth, which begins to move and shape itself around the words of Alan's curbside invocation. Save me. Thank you. I learned that, thank you. I learned that a friend also knew Alan, knew him well, actually, Sienna, and she let me know a little while later, it might have been about a year or so after I wrote this, I'm not sure, that he actually passed away. So here's to Alan and all the angels of Midtown. Well, it's time for side 2. I called this side, it's getting a little more cheery, more cheerful there. I call this side, What If I Die in a Minor Key? So that's maybe not as dark as it sounds, at least in my mind. So a while back, I was driving around in Hoover, Alabama, passing the Piggly Wiggly from our house to probably getting pho or something, and a cover version of the Fountains of Wayne song, It Must Be Summer, performed by the Awkward Paws, spelled P-A-W-S, which is awesome. It came on the radio. I'd heard it a few times, but for some reason in that moment, it just it's a really jangle pop guitar pop song. And I just had this thought, what if the song you're listening to, assuming you're listening to a song, when you die, is what your afterlife is like? You know, like if it's this song, will it be all just jangle and summer and a cul-de-sac, always dusk, and or I hated to think about some other possibilities. MacArthur's Park, oh my goodness, that would be a trippy song. I mean, a trippy afterlife, wouldn't it? But I also got to thinking, okay, if that's a possibility, maybe music kind of shapes our lives too. I mean, of course it does, but maybe among recent thoughts on reality and consciousness and stuff, this kind of overlapped, and I thought, well, maybe the music that we listen to, our soundtracks of our lives, kind of helps create our reality, whatever that is. And I've been reading about how music uses all parts of the brain. It's not just like, some things just use a certain part, but there's mathematics and different things in music that everything lights up. So, why not? So I know that with this in mind, music kind of has followed me and it's felt like it shaped my moments. It's followed me around the world, actually, songs, and followed me back. I've traveled to Vietnam a few times, and I've always been surprised to hear random songs in strange situations, random situations, like the Carpenters' Top of the World in a hotel in Saigon, in the bar. One time in a lobby of a hotel in Saigon, too, the Connell's song 7475, which is a 90s kind of alt-pop song, just came on out of the blue. And also a French language version of Bang Bang, which I think was it Cher that did that? Which actually I'd heard a few times in Vietnamese restaurants here in the U.S., so that didn't seem as strange. But that night that those two songs played in that hotel lobby, I had the opportunity to meet two former North Vietnamese soldiers who were there to deliver flowers to a memorial service for U.S. veterans that we were going to the next day. And they told stories about how when they were prisoners of war, they were forced to remain on their knees for hours with their hands behind their backs, one cup of water on the floor in front of them. And all this, I'm hearing all this with songs like Bang Bang and 74, 75 in the background. And so it's sort of those moments, that juxtaposition that I obsess about. And the fact that I hear these songs different places in the world so randomly, it fascinates me. So that's partially what this poem's about, called White Noise, Black Sky. After the overpass, where satellites are lost and the dashboard goes silent, that's where ghosts congregate, just a smoke break, before they rise again on electric angel wings to black sky and 50,000-watt surf. Their song is clearest between twilight static and AM surrender, when midnight whispers ionosphere ricochet until broadcast truths crackle through decades of white noise. Fat man and little boy, back seats of buses, war is over, soldier escorts for schoolgirls, war is now. The signal never dies, only oscillates into a number station lullaby, a monotone mantra echoing the chords of songs lost to wars gone cold. 1-4-1-5-4-1. Howling wolf growls at the moon his all-night harmonica breath and heat lightning guitar buzzing a trio of radio towers north of Nashville. 141151. Hank Williams dreams his last highway song, kicks off from a diamond tower to the south, and flies away to the same lonesome moon. 121251. Seasons in the Sun escapes a 1973 transistor radio on a monophonic wave of staccato keyboard and tremolo guitar, hitches a Tennessee August breeze until it turns tropical over Saigon, where songs from the West surrender to skies with mortar breath. 30 years later and 9 hours north in a Nha Trang school for street children, a teenage boy with straight black hair parted in the middle plays the radio melody on sweat-tuned strings of a blonde guitar. Yesterday's soundtrack of war becomes today's karaoke hit list. In Manila, a barista hums Top of the World as she cleans the espresso machine. In Memphis, a Laotian man sings I Started a Joke, and waiting guests dance Lam Vong. In Saigon, Sound of Silence frames a whiskey chatter scene in the rooftop bar of the Rex Hotel. Enemies become sisters and brothers, the same chorus, and wait for the last soldier's child to kiss the cheek of her father's enemy and share a song about graveyards and flowers. For a neighborhood DMZ to end when white patio diners walk one block over to sit with black parents and watch their children play football in a field. For the day, a silent radio tower on the edge of downtown glows in the rain, hums with the promise of tomorrow's transmissions. Thank you. Talking about music following me around, I feel like I need to say, I had a whole section I was going to share about Lee Hazelwood, one of my obsessions, and I was like, nah. Well, we heard 2 or 3 Lee Hazelwood songs before coming over here, so I feel like I need to at least pay tribute to Lee Hazelwood's Ghost tonight, if nothing else. So here's to Phaedra and Summer Wine. And I brought, some of those scenes back with me from Vietnam. And those memories had soundtracks here too. This is called Hoi An. Rebel Rebel in my headphones takes care of the cafe Christmas music, but not Santa Claus in a Japanese Viet restaurant. How he stared down Good Fortune Kitty, waving alone at the sushi bar. So I'd leave and drive by the median cemetery with one tombstone. I'll stop and learn who's buried there some night when the wind doesn't make me wish for Hoi An. March on Chan Phu Street is really what I want. Now it's cool and raining as Loke opens the shop for a day of measuring tourists and pulling silk. She won't steer her motorcycle home until the lights are on in the apartment over Viet Way restaurant. When sicklos sleep beneath the gaze of the moon rabbit, full grown and ready for only candle lanterns to light storefronts where Buddhas wait next to jade bracelets. The fluorescence of a passing mall stains my side mirror like wet streets lined with hundreds of luminous silk planets, colors finite as a Christmas lawn and passport faces sheltered from rain under the pagoda roof of the Japanese bridge. By the time I get home, I want to unplug my city. I want to throw the switch on all the electric billboards and street lamps. I want to kill the grid. I only have one green silk lantern made crooked by my tourist hands and a Christmas tree color wheel. I know you have candles and matches. If I can pull this off, we'll meet at the cafe after Silent Night has ended and chairs are upside down on tables. We'll set up out front, talk of a lonely highway grave, and remember Chan Phu Street. Thank you. Well, there was another mixtape, very important one, that happened in 2017. Jennifer, my beautiful wife, had this wonderful idea. Music has been a very important part of our relationship, and she had this wonderful idea of compiling songs that have been important to us, and including and putting them on the tables at the wedding with little notes, thoughts from each of us about different songs. And some of those songs included Day After Day by Badfinger, Passionate Kisses, Lucinda Williams, The Troggs, Our Love Will Still Be There. So we did that, and this was maybe a little more ambitious, had more ambition than actually follow through on this, but I endeavored to take lines from each of those pieces that we wrote and create a poem. I didn't get lines from all of them, but here is what came from that. These are lines from the different pieces we wrote on different songs that we basically sharing why they were important to us in our relationship. In the year of our big star 2012, the summer and early fall burned bright and fast, back and forth from Birmingham to Nashville, burning up 65 both ways, riding the wings of my glass-and-a-half courage. In a putting the universe right fashion, I'd lined up my ghosts like the Von Trapp children, a pact to adopt an anti-Heart Day stance and commit Valentine's Isle anarchy, sitting cross-legged on the bed under a ceiling fan breeze and waiting for him to realize his grow old and die alone plan sucked, waiting for him to change his mind. All the times I've danced in the kitchen to this song, the dream pop for Fiza's organ and ethereal vocals, I've never worn a Stetson hat, not even back in the 90s. Still, when we were together, the ghosts beat a path. We were both in our 20s and certain the world was ours for the taking, with the weapons of music, love, and perfect soundtrack moments. But the roads seemed littered with Mitsubishi Gallants of all colors, and David Cassidy was on his own for breakfast. Joy and pain are the closest of neighbors, and the right person can keep you in the better yard. Here's to you, babe. Is it the effort? So we've definitely had our own mixtape, haven't we? Yeah. And another part of that relationship, our relationship has been the back and forth on 65, which was mentioned in that compilation. And that inspired this next one called St. Iggy and the Rocket. Iggy sips his coffee cold through a stirrer, says he likes it that way. When a thing ends, when it falls apart or dies, there's a light, he says. Like fireworks, I say. And he tells me Roman candles and bottle rockets are as useful as saints hanging next to dog tags. Says they sound like war but fade too fast. I start to tell Iggy about the time I stood in a field untouched by highway and city lights, nothing but fireflies and stars meeting on a black canvas mix of night trees and sky. I start to tell him how alive I felt there as we passed the I-65 rocket in Elkmont, but he reaches for the radio, turns it up to hear Elton tell us Mars is no place to raise kids. My hand surfs the wind outside the passenger window, and I wonder if Elkmont is a good place to start a family. The dark access road and interstate church, the gas station with more beer and soda posters than windows, the houses dark before dusk. How many things have ended at this exit? How many highway-liberated souls have climbed the rest stop rocket? When I'm certain Iggy is wrong about light and death, something small and hard slams against my middle finger. I jerk my hand inside the car and check for blood. Instead, the disembodied abdomen of a firefly glows, unblinking like a stone from a mourning ring below my second knuckle. Thanks. So I called this the last mixtape, and I think I originally thought of that as kind of, later in life, like, the last mixtape kind of thing, the final one. But then I got to thinking what that could maybe mean other than that. And I got to thinking about all these songs we carry with us, kind of all these songs under my skin, as I like to think about it. And it occurred to me that maybe I'm the last mixtape. I carry all this with me. We all are. All of our musical moments and the accompanying memories, they're with us all the time. So with that in mind and the contemplations on, is this a simulation or this reality, this poem came called A Sushi Roll Named Axl Rose. If this universe is a simulation, who wrote the code for a sushi roll named Axl Rose? And why does the singer at Overtime Grill and Bar know Little Wing, but not Dead Flowers? Why does McCartney's bass rattle my left back speaker when I turn up Rain on a drive to Piggly Wiggly? Then there's my mind, which needs the tether of sound, needs music to tuck under my skin and distract me from the lines of code I want to forget. 53 years of songs I carry like God's mixtape to the other side of the world and back to Elliston Place, where I choke on the myth of perfect soundtrack scenes under a marquee epitaph for the ones who left the game, the ones like Chip, who always told me to turn up my amp after we opened for him in a club called The End. That's where I began, Black Squire Strat against my stomach, college radio sacrament in my mouth, everything loud to hide the fear which fell away when my body surrendered to adrenaline. Years later, Chip and I conjured planetary transmissions with guitars and effects pedals in a shed behind his house, a communion as noisy as the end of time, as fleeting as a final breath. Was the diabetes a cruel Easter egg? Sometimes I'm not sure if my memories are of dreams or real moments. I vibrate at a frequency between the certainty of a clean mask I push against my face and the flux of all the songs I've heard only once. I wonder if I was in that shed at all, on that stage, ever heard a song called Dead Flowers. If this is a simulation, I expect an electric rainbow body when I die. My flesh disappeared into all the colors of sound. My code wiped clean and nothing left of me but the fading glow of a dusty vacuum tube. Thank you. Thanks a lot. This has been fun, guys. It's good to be back. Thank you, Don. Thank you for doing sound, and thank you guys for coming out. Anybody that logged on? I'm not sure if... I think I'm done. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. And I think that there's probably a sequel to this last mixed tape. Wow, what a story, what a life. I am grateful that we were able to share in this. And thank you all again for being here. It is your support that makes this happen all the time. So whether you're here again in presence or virtually, we thank you. And have a good evening. And next month, come back.